Charles Morgan had the unfortunate luck to die at the age of 17 in 1938. His mother thought he had a stroke. His father thought his appendix had burst, but only Charlie to his friends, knew that it had been a brain aneurysm. The man in the dark cloak with a pale face had told him as much before he asked if he wanted to come with him. Charlie had declined, telling him he wanted to stay a little longer and see what became of his parents. The man in the cowl only shrugged and told him not to stick around too long, or he might never make it out. Charlie had given him the bird as he left, but now he wished the man had told him how to leave. It turned out there was a hell of a lot easier to die than it was to know what to do after you were dead. Charlie had watched his parents age 20 years after his death, and both of them had finally sold the house at the ripe old age of 60 and gone on to whatever life they had after that. Charlie couldn't follow them. He had died in the house, and he was tied to the house. But that was okay. His parents had been a little boring, but the people who moved in after them had been fun. His parents had moved out in 1960, and Charlie had had the house pretty much to himself since then. In that time, 14 families had lived in the house where he died. Some of them he scared. Charlie turned out to be pretty good at scaring. Some of them he just watched, want to know how other families were, what they did. Those were fun. Charlie liked just watching people sometimes. You got to learn a lot about people when you just sat around and watched. Some of the families had kids that Charlie talked to. The young ones were usually a little more in tune with the spirit world, and some of them could see and talk to you. To adults, you were just a child's imaginary friend. But to that child, you were real, and that made Charlie feel like he was alive again. Some of the kids had other ways of communicating with spirits, and Charlie liked to mess with them. Charlie had seen all: Ouija boards, spirit catchers, automatic writers, ghost boxes, spirit radios, and every other damn thing that was supposed to help you talk to ghosts. It was as if none of them had ever thought about just talking to ghosts. Charlie liked to talk, and if they had just approached him and talked, he would have talked.
Welcome to Room 13, where every story hides a secret, a place where the unknown comes to life, and the eerie is all too real. Here, we uncover the chilling tales that lurk in the shadows,
Radio, or make their spirit boxes send back strange and often cryptic answers. It was all good fun for him. Charlie didn't have anything better to do and liked having something to pass the time. When the Winstons moved in, Charlie found that he was the one who was afraid. The Winstons were a nice enough family. Roger Winston was the father, and he worked as a foreman at the steel mill where Charlie's father had once worked. It probably wasn't the same mill as it had been in the 1930s, but Charlie had only been there once on a class trip, so he really didn't have any way to know. Patricia Winston was a stay-at-home mother who shuffled around the house and kept the place clean enough. She liked to watch daytime talk shows, and Charlie found that he liked Maury Povich and Jerry Springer enough to sit in the living room while she cleaned and soak up the drama. And to a ghost, emotions are better than a piece of chocolate cake. Then there were the children, Terry and Margaret Winston. They were 12 and 16, respectively, and neither of them really believed in ghosts. Their friend told them stories about the ghosts that lived in the haunted house their parents had bought, but the two kids just waved it off as superstitious nonsense. Margaret was too busy worrying about boys to worry about ghosts, and Terry fancied himself a man of science and believed there was likely a scientific reason for whatever anomalies were happening in the house. There would be no talking to these two. Charlie was sure of that. But then came the Halloween party that changed everything. The Winston parents had gone out of town to help with the funeral arrangements for Mrs. Winston's beloved aunt. They had left Margaret in charge, telling her that she was not to have people over, and she was not to do anything reckless while they were away. Margaret's response to this was to have a small get-together with some of her friends and let Terry invite a few of his little friends over. Some of them brought alcohol and music and scary movies and things to while away the evening. But one of Margaret's friends brought over a Ouija board, and Charlie saw his chance to have a little fun. They invited Terry and his friend in to hold the session with them, and Charlie had practically wrung his hands together in glee. He started with the usual ghostly pranks, spelling out strange things with a planchette, pretending to be different people, and generally didn't notice. How could she? She was still looking at the Ouija board like it had all the answers. She went right on reading Charlie's message. Her mouth scrunched up as she sounded out the words. And then she shook her head and looked around the room as if she intended to laugh, and just couldn't bring one to the surface. Run. Why would I run? I'm not in any danger. I've never been in any danger. This entity is an old friend. He wouldn't. That was when she seemed to notice the kids around her had changed. Two of them, girls that Charlie had never learned names of, were smiling a little too wide, and in a way that made him think their jaws might be breaking. Margaret had blood running down her cheeks as her fingers seemed to be trying to tear out her own eyelashes. Her brother and his friends were trying to rip off each other's ears, blood running down the sides of their heads. The smiling girls had already begun to tear their clothes off, and the whole room began to stink with the smell of fresh blood. Charlie remembered that smell. He had smelled blood just before. He never smelled anything ever again. But he didn't think there had been this much blood, even when his brain had suddenly let go. The children fell on her, pushing the would-be mystic onto the floor and on top of the Ouija board. They ripped at her, their fingers tearing her clothes and then her skin and then pulling at her bones. She started to scream, but it only lasted until they found her vitals. As they tore at her, it was as if something opened in that hateful square cardboard. All of them began to fall, dropping into whatever void had been created by the Ouija board. And suddenly they were all gone. With its sacrifice taken, the spirit turned its eyes to Charlie, and it spoke inside his head in a voice that would have sent most people running for their lives. Get in my way again, and it will be the last thing you ever do. Then it simply rolled itself up into the closet like a deflated child's toy, and the room was empty. There was no blood, no torn clothes, and the only evidence that anyone had been here was a plate of cooling pizza and a bowl of soggy popcorn. The Ouija board was still there, the planchette still in the dead center where it had been left. It was the only evidence the police found, and all the children were considered missing when the parents returned to find the house empty. All the doors had been locked from the inside. All the windows had been secured, and neighbors claimed they had seen other children coming over that night, but had not seen anyone leaving the next day. The parents of the other children said that Margaret told them she had been allowed to have a few friends over, but none of them seemed to have any idea what had happened to the children once the sun had gone down. That was how Margaret's mother found herself in her daughter's bedroom, sitting on the floor looking at the Ouija board. Her husband was out. He had decided the home didn't feel as welcoming as it once did. She was drunk on cooking sherry and dozing against her daughter's nightstand when the planchette began to move on the board. She thought she was imagining things. When it began to find the letters on that sinful piece of cardboard, she sat up and took notice. It returned to the middle and then started again, spelling out the same message before returning to the middle again and again. He took your children. He took them somewhere, but no one can go. Even though he was not strong enough to stand up to that spirit, Charlie wanted to give her something his own mother had not been allowed to have. He wanted the woman to have a little bit of closure, and if it gave her comfort, then he supposed that would be worth something.
Hey, the stories aren't over yet, but consider subscribing and leaving a like. With a simple tap on the screen, you help our work a lot. Now, without further ado, let's move on to the next story.